A lot of information and a lot of very deep thought, very fast. Like most of the people that have presented today, I believe that the conclaves are for fellowshipping with each other as much as for education. And even when we do share things with each other, we share what we've been doing since the last time that we've seen each other. And so that's what I try to do with this talk. It's something that I have been doing not only since the last time I've seen all of you, it's something that I've been doing for about 35 years now. I have some topics that I keep thinking on and thinking on and thinking on. And I've given several talks on this subject that has come out in various ways. One was astoundingly unsuccessful in Detroit a couple of years ago, but I'll try something along that line again. It's a very important topic, or a very important subject, and many mystics consider this topic the most important subject that we deal with in mysticism. As spiritual aspirants, we're all trying to become more conscious. Even if we're conscious of our own sins more, we're trying to become more conscious. Now, consciousness is a very difficult subject, especially some of the consciousness that we are trying to unfold. Because we can be conscious of items in our environment, but to be conscious of consciousness itself is not an easy task. And basically that's what we are seeking in enlightenment. Now, since consciousness is such a big thing, we're going to look at only one thing, and we're going to look at that one thing from one point of view. It's something that is common to most mystery schools and most major teachings. That it has to do with transcendent consciousness. By transcendent consciousness, we mean anything that goes beyond an abstract, concrete thought, an abstract idea, or a spiritual experience that is beyond that. In terms of Rosicrucian philosophy, we mean consciousness in the human spirit, or in the life spirit, or something deeper than that. Everything that we're talking about, then, we're not talking about specifics. We're not talking about things you can point to. We're talking to universal things, universal ideas, or the truth that is within universal ideas, which truth is completely universal. Everything that we do in our daily lives is concrete. And the language that we use to talk about what we do in our lives is also concrete. So when we're talking about things of this nature, our language is going to be pathetically inadequate to get to where we want to get to. But difficult as it may be, we have to take on difficult topics. What spiritual growth is all about, it is about taking on things that are impossibly difficult and working with them until we can accomplish them. Several mystics have put forth the opinion that initiation into the higher consciousness of the type we're talking about begins with Neptune and Uranus. Others have said the same thing using different words. They have said that such consciousness as it is experienced in the body depends on the pineal and pituitary body. As bodies, I should say, as the foci in our physical bodies. In the Rosicrucian philosophy, the relating to consciousness, as stated by Max Heindel, is stated in a very simple way. But it takes a long time to be able to figure it out. The sweeping statement that Max Heindel makes and remakes several times, and when you have an initiate teacher making the statement and repeating it again and again, you know it's very important. The statement that Max Heindel makes is that all consciousness is a consequence of the struggle between the desire body and the vital body. All consciousness is a consequence of the struggle between the desire body and the vital body. So we now will try to follow what that means and then try to bring it into what we do with our spiritual exercises and with our lives. The Rosicrucian philosophy is a modern philosophy. It's an evolutionary philosophy. The claim is made that it is advanced. And by advanced, not meaning greater than, but advanced in the same way that you advance timing in your automobile. And that is what evolution means. It means something from a more advanced perspective. That you've experienced more, you've grown more, and consequently your philosophy is different. Earlier philosophies that were developed earlier on the timeline teach that one unfolds spiritually and awakens to spiritual consciousness. The Rosicrucian philosophy has no quarrel with that. We do indeed unfold things that have been planted in us by God through the gods. And we do awaken to those things. The Rosicrucian philosophy teaches, in an evolutionary sense, that beyond unfoldment and awakening, there is spiritual growth. Spiritual growth through soul growth. Now, for many people, the concept of the spirit growing and being fed, so to speak, is not easily accepted. That's understandable, because most people who have transcendent experiences have very momentary experiences, and in a very brief instant experience eternal conditions, and it seems as if everything is there, and that nothing changes, and that everything is completely timeless. It's complete. Perhaps if we had longer and more continuous experiences transcendentally, we would indeed take on an evolutionary concept. Not necessarily considering evolution in time as we consider time now, but some kind of an evolutionary concept. And that is what the adepts of the Rosicrucian order who have presented us with this philosophy claim. They claim that even in transcendent things, there is spiritual growth through soul growth, and there is evolution. Let's try to get a little bit more down into the details. All mystery schools, or at least all the mystery schools that I've ever studied, are Trinitarian in nature. They claim that the one ineffable, unspeakable Spirit can only be manifest and can only be understood in the simplest way through three different attributes. Just like all of space cannot be defined unless you have three lines that cross each other or three dots that signify three lines. the three attributes of the individual spirit in macrocosm and microcosm are the divine spirit, the life spirit, and the human spirit. And these spiritual attributes are focused into the phenomenal worlds in which we live. That is, the divine spirit is reflectively projected into the solids, liquids, and gases of this world. The life spirit is reflectively projected into the vital ethers, which is life with a small l. And the human spirit is reflectively projected into the desire nature and into the desire world. Stated in very brief, the evolutionary creation in which we are participating, the spirit reflectively projects itself into the states of matter, into the unknown in those states of matter, and in interacting with those reflective projections, the matter is changed, and the essence of the unknown becomes known by the interaction of the spirit with the unknown. It's a continuous, ongoing evolutionary process. And the essence of each of the reflectively projective worlds, the states of matter, the states of ignorance, the essence of them is taken into the spirit as soul. And it is through this that the spirit is fed or nourished and strengthened and awakened. It's sort of like one of those alarm clocks where they throw a pail of cold water on you to wake you up. It's when you interact with something that is there's a resistance. So several things happen when the spirit interacts with matter. The spirit becomes materialized either as a world or as a body, and it takes on limitations. The unlimited needs limitation in order to have definitive knowledge to reflect back to itself and become aware of itself. Matter is worked on, and the unknown becomes known, and the essence is taken into the spirit, and the spirit is awakened. That's what's going on every day. Even if we're just doing our mundane tasks like tying our shoes or walking down the street or something like that, all of these things are happening. And the more that we can be consciously aware of these things in our lives, the better we can work with the process and the more quickly we awaken our consciousness. And that's what it's all about. We don't want to keep thinking the same dumb mistakes over again and again and again. We don't want to be in the dark. We don't want to hurt people. We want to become more conscious of what's going on. And so that is our goal. When the human spirit works in the desire world through the desire body in a human being, the result is called emotional soul in the Rosicrucian philosophy. And that emotional soul is what most people consider soul to be altogether. When we say that somebody is a soulful person, we're talking about emotional soul. Especially artists who live very feelingful lives, and many of them feel that reveling in the desire body and being a bohemian artist is about the tops that you can be as an artist. What comes out of that is emotional soul. When the life spirit works into the unknown through the etheric body or the vital body in the etheric realm, the result is called intellectual soul, which in turn feeds the life spirit. The term intellect is and has been in all of Western philosophy. It does not mean intellectual like a college professor or something like that. Intellect was the ancient name in Greece for the life spirit. It was like pure truth. as when Christ, who spoke from the life spirit, said, I am the truth. Not I am truthful or I am the truth of this or that, but I am the truth. The whole truth in itself. So intellectual soul is feeds the intellect. That is the life spirit. Intellectual soulfulness is recognized as the ability to be sympathetic or antipathetic to things that are fruitful or unfruitful, or pleasant or unpleasant, or good or evil. It comes from repeated experiences. Everything in the vital body, as we recall, works by repetition. There are ways that we experience things over again and again and again. And in that interaction is where we build a sympathy or antipathy for what works with the repetitive process. When the divine spirit works on the chemical region of the physical world through the dense physical body, the result is called conscious soul. We're talking about consciousness. This is the kind of soulfulness where a person knows the nature of stuff. We happen to have an expert in this room who knows all about the nature of stuff. You know, you work with some people and they seem almost like magicians because they know what stuff is like. And that's a consequence of having interacted with the chemical region many times and having learned a lot from it. This is the most basic kind of soulfulness, and it's the most basic consciousness. That's what we're looking for, is consciousness. From this, it's very obvious, from the statement of Max Heindel and putting it all together, it's very obvious that it is here in our dense physical bodies that we awaken the most basic consciousness. Yes, we can unfold clairvoyance. Yes, we can fly around in the inner worlds in between lives when we're not connected with this body, but the basic increments, the basic awakenings of consciousness happen here. And we have precious few hours here on this plane in this physical body to awaken that consciousness. What, it's one of the things that mystical students seem to get into. They want to think about other worlds all the time, not realizing that right here is the only place in our entire life cycle that we can really awaken fundamental, basic consciousness. Now that we know this, we can see why, if all of the basic consciousness is developed in this physical body, we can see why there is such a struggle between the vital body and the desire body for the control of the physical body. Because that controls the most basic consciousness. Our dense physical bodies, in this regard, are something like a battleground. They're also a testing ground where we see where our creativity works or it doesn't work. But in this sense, in the struggle between the vital body and the desire body, it is a battleground. Now, I really recommend going back to some of the sections in the Cosmoconception because it is very beautiful, because Max Heindel says that at various times, the hierarchies that have guided our evolution have guided the focus on the desire body or on the vital body to accomplish certain ends in the physical body. One of the most beautiful examples is when we were falling deeper into matter than we needed to, we did this because of a basic desire. We desired knowledge and we desired experience. What happened was that the hierarchies helped us by helping us by focusing our exaggerated desire to produce greater hardness. The vital body produces softness, but anytime you desire something and give yourself to a desire, you become hard. And the result is our skeleton. If the desire body hadn't been given that emphasis, we wouldn't have a skeleton. We'd be something like amoeba. And this section from Max Heindel in the Cosmoconception is really, really beautiful. You can determine what the constitution of your future vehicles are going to be just by how you work the battle between the vital body and the desire body.
Can you give an example of that? How you can work?
Yes, I'm sort of working through that right now.
Oh.
Defeating cancer.
If we were to leave everything up to the vital body, or if we were to emphasize the vital body, we would revert to something like a plant-like state. We would vegetate, we'd be alive, we'd grow, and we'd store up all kinds of energy, the way the plants do. We'd even have enough energy that we could give it to other people. And people who are magnetic healers do that. They drink either raw fresh milk or, probably even better, a lot of fresh vegetable juice, which is just brimming with etheric energy. So if we took this extreme and we worked on the vegetative, the vital principle in our lives, we become softies. We become soft. If we took to a total extreme, we would become vegetative masses. If we left things up to the desire body, we would revert to something like animals. Only animals that didn't have a group spirit to give it restraint. And so we would be complete desire creatures. And we would desire and desire and desire until we burned out all of the vital energy and we hardened into something like lumps of ash or something like that. So from this we can see that the basic consciousness, the basic conscious soul matter, is gained through animative and vegetative processes in ourselves. The vegetative wanting to keep things in the status quo, the animative always wanting to change things. Now this is happening in us even if we're on life support systems. Even if we're in a coma for 20 or 30 years, the vegetative processes probably are taking over, but whether we're aware of it, everything we do every day. I walk down the street and ogle a pretty young woman, I'm manifesting the desire principle. And you can see in your own life, people who become very desirable people become hard. They think only about the gratification of their own desires, and they become very hardened people, which is not really a good way to live at all. Now we want to, since we are spiritual students, we want to know about how to work with this self-consciously in our lives. We're still working toward consciousness yet. This is one of those talks that the entire talk is introduction. There's no finale to it. It's all introduction. Our bodies are sometimes called vehicles of consciousness. They're not the consciousness itself. For example, I cut my finger yesterday when working on the ingredients for the soup. You get any blood in the soup, you don't have to do no magical process going on here. But it feels like the pain is in the finger, but the recognition of the pain is really in the desire body. But the consciousness is in the spirit. So, the vehicles of consciousness record and communicate experience, but the experience itself, the consciousness of it, comes in the spirit. So if we repeat the idea of Max Heindel that all consciousness is a consequence of the struggle between the vital body and the desire body, and think about it then, that means that all of our consciousness right now, reflected transcendentally, is in the human spirit and in the life spirit. This is extremely important because this is where we are at in our evolution right now. So let's read, because the vital body is reflected in the life spirit, the desire body is reflected in the human spirit. And therefore, our consciousness that is awakened through the struggle between the desire body and the vital body is suspended between the human spirit and the life spirit. Now we need to look into what that means. Maybe we'll get to see what happens when we're conscious somewhere along the way.
Jim, I have a question.
Yes?
Is this a new revelation for you?
No. It's a continuing, ongoing revelation.
Because I've never heard you expand on it like this.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a continuing. It's been this one will probably flop like Detroit too much time. The human spirit is seated in the region of abstract thought, the realm of ideas. The human spirit, our spiritual ego, our self, is an idea. So when we have this notion of our selfhood being this special something or another, what we're relating to is an idea. It is a divinely created idea, created by the gods in us, has a potential in us, but it is an idea. Our self, as an idea, is a focus of the universal spirit. So it is the spirit knowing itself through a self or through all of these selves. It's like the spirit knows itself by taking on the limitation of becoming conceived in the sense of immaculate conception. It's immaculate because it doesn't have anything to do with the concrete realms at all. Therefore, our self is an idea. It is also the idea of God. And it is the idea of self as God. So that if one has a baptism by the human spirit, what one has is a full and total recognition of the universal spirit knowing itself as God in that idea sense. Down to the last page already. I designed this to have only 3 pages of notes. Our life spirit is in the world of life spirit. And the life spirit, macrocosm or microcosm, are the same thing. And that is the first purely spiritual realm. It doesn't even have the internal structures of an idea. An idea you can usually put into a formula of some kind, even if that formula happens to be a fairy tale. Sometimes some of those ideas are mathematical ideas, but we'll not talk about that today. He's a mathematician.
Should be an algebraic equation.
Yes, yes. The life spirit is unconditioned and it's unconditional. Some people talk of the life spirit much different, using the word much differently than the way Betty used it. They talk about it as being the void, because it is void of any attribution that can be given to it, because it's unconditioned. The human spirit, which is called the thinker, Because it is the focus that does the thinking through the mind. The human spirit is called the spirit of truth, because it is the truth knower. But the life spirit is the truth. It is the truth unconditioned and unconditional. It is the truth that is within every idea, but no idea can possibly contain it. You want to study something really deep? Rod lent me a book called Gödel, Escher, Bach, and it goes into the mathematical logic that says that any logical system cannot be totally consistent with the whole truth. It has to be limited. And that's exactly what mysticism says of the relationship of the life spirit to the human spirit. Christ, not Jesus, was the being focused of the life spirit. So Christ can say, I am the way, because it's everywhere. I am the truth, because it is that total truth. I am the life. When we say that's life, we need to say that it's the meaning of everything, but you can't really say anything about it, because anything you say about it becomes very trite. And when it says, I am the love, so all of the I ams of Christ relate to as much as we can put in our language, as abstract as we can be, the way we can point to the life spirit. All three attributes of the threefold spirit interact with each other. And they all need each other in order for there to be discrete being, in order for there to be objectified consciousness. So since we're looking at all consciousness being the result of the interaction between the desire body and the vital body, let's look at a few of the interactions in the realms of consciousness, that is, between the human spirit and the life spirit. Love, even life spirit love, is objective. It needs someone or someones to love. Conversely speaking, the self needs to be loved. Any being that isn't loved is pitiful. And even the concept of self shrivels if it isn't loved. In St. John's Gospel, which is the gospel that is very dear to the Rosicrucian movement, St. John describes himself as the disciple who Jesus loved, or the disciple who Christ loved. That's a shorthand. That means the disciple who was initiated into the Christian mystery. One is initiated by receiving that love, by receiving that truth that not only nourishes the self, but can raise it to a higher level of consciousness. So we can see now in another way that interaction between Uranus and Neptune, or the pituitary and the pineal. We're seeing it now on a transcendent way. Ideas need intuition. Chard can tell you that any mathematician, when he's gone through a proof, especially if it's a long proof, the only way that you know if that proof is a proof is through intuition. So ideas need intuition for it to even know that they're true. The life spirit, on the other hand, is full. It's full to superfluidity. And it needs to give birth. And it gives birth through ideas. So the ideas need the intuition, and the fullness of love, or the fullness of truth, needs something to give birth through. So these are two ways in which the human spirit and the life spirit interact with each other. There are a myriad of such descriptions that could be made, but we have only enough time for two. In fact, I think we're out of time now. let's try to look at this all with an image. But we have to be very careful because the image is not the reality. The reality is something that, in this case, is pretty much invisible. This is an image that is common to mysticism and religion pretty much throughout the world. In Greece, the divine individuality, that is God, as a threefold spirit, just as we are a threefold spirit, was seen as a vortex. In the Old Testament, Jehovah, especially in Exodus, the divine individuality in Judaism, was pictured as either a whirlpool of fire or a whirlpool of smoke. Fire by night and smoke by day, but that whirlpool was again the image that was given. Now, we can't say that God is a whirlpool of fire. That's only a symbolic representation. Everything in space is a whirlpool of light. If you look at every galaxy, some of them are, in a very nebular state, but as they're formed and they go through their evolution, the whole of space is filled with whirlpools of light. So, in order to form an image of the relationship of the human spirit to the life spirit, using that image is ideal. Our self is just an idea. And in this case, we're saying just an idea because it's sort of empty. It can only exist in selfness. And that selfness is the life spirit. The self can't exist by itself. It can only exist within selfness. In the same way that a principle can only exist within the pure truth. If we aspire to the consciousness of Christ, in order to be loved by Christ, like John the Beloved was loved by Christ, we have to have some way to express that love. We have to have an individuality. And that individuality we can picture in our consciousness as being a whirlpool within an ocean of selfness. Within an ocean of truth, we produce a whirlpool. And that whirlpool is empty. It's vacuous. We know from the Rosicrucian philosophy that the process of concrete thinking is a process of evacuating. That when the thinker is thinking, it produces a vacuum. And that vacuum then is a means to hold or to reflect or to see the truth that is the light of the life spirit. What we're talking about is passing out of ego consciousness, which is an exalted state if we can have it transcendentally, into life spirit consciousness. We're talking about a healthy spiritual relationship where we have a respect of the divinity that is our real self, at the same time that we have a contemplation of the divine love and the divine light that we are only the truth, a truthful expression of. In order to do this, to pass from consciousness of self, which is sort of empty, even if it's universal, we have to transfer our consciousness to the life spirit. If we want to have the Christ consciousness, we have to transfer the consciousness out of personal egodom into Christ. This is a big thing. This doesn't mean that we wipe out self. Because if we wipe out self, neither Christ nor us as individualities can learn or do anything. So what we have to do is transfer the consciousness out of the emptiness of the whirlpool and into the ocean. We have to see the reality of our being and the world around us, not only from our egoistic eyes, but from the eyes of Christ. That's what we're trying to do if we're trying to come to be loved by Christ and to receive the Christian mystic initiation. Now, this is something that happens everywhere. It happens everywhere in our life. So let's try to be practical. We've got about 5 minutes left or less. And let's try to look at some practical ways of being, changing our attention from the emptiness of self to the fullness of Christ. And this is, I'm going to try and redeem a little bit, because 2 years ago in Detroit, I tried to talk about this whole subject in terms of politics, because it's in all of our politics. The extreme left, which thinks in terms of the collective consciousness, is associated with the life spirit. The extreme right, where all of the onus falls on the individual, is associated with the human spirit. You can't become completely an individualist or you die out, and you can't become completely collective where you have no self. And so it is in the interplay between the two of these that things are important. And so that in our political views, like for example, I used to live behind the Coliseum here. And I learned very clearly of my fascination with my egocentric rights relative to the collective rights. And in the Coliseum, there would be rock shows and there would be hockey games. And so every time my wife or I wanted to go downtown, we'd be often met with this huge, massive vehicles. And what would normally be a 5-minute trip downtown turned out to be a 25-minute trip. It used to go less than 4 miles. And I would be outraged, but eventually it got to me that this is where the individual, I'm only just one individual going downtown. It might be a little bit or taking somebody to the hospital or something like that. But I'm just one individual going downtown, and these people have a right to go to mass entertainment. Yeah. And so that's the collective consciousness versus the individual consciousness. And it's very difficult to sacrifice individual consciousness to the collective consciousness, except, you can do the same. You can be a suicide bomber. You can sacrifice individual consciousness to the collective consciousness. But that kind of idea I tried to develop over in Detroit, but I fell on my face and I couldn't do it right. So we'll try something else.
That's a good one. I like it.
All right. I'll try to give you 3 simple little thoughts or 3 simple little aphorisms to just keep in mind so that we can think about the relationship between self and Christ, between self and that which is beyond self. Because in that balance is where our consciousness is going to come. You see how it works. The human spirit is reflected in the desire body, and every time politics shifts to the right, it becomes a greed thing. You see what I mean? The desire kicks in. On the other hand, things shift to the left, and they go into the life spirit. It gets reflected into the vital body, and there's no individual initiative. In the Soviet Union, people had no individual initiative to do anything. But now that things have swung to the right, now you've got all kinds of individual initiatives in terms of gangsters and everything else. But you get the idea. So that's what we're trying to work with. The first thought is to warn us about the possessiveness of ourself, or the covetousness of ourself, or the vanity of ourself. If we think about it, as much as we love ourself, And as much as we like the idea of the fact that we are divine and have all of that potential, it really isn't ours. Our selfhood really isn't ours. We can increase its potency by our deeper and deeper concentration in life. We can make that vortex that is us spin really strong and be really emptied out to be a vehicle of the truth. But it really isn't ours. It didn't exist. We as selves didn't exist before it was given to us. Everything between the human spirit and the life spirit is paradox. The relationship between truth and ideas, because the ideas are just inadequate before that universal truth. But our greatest selfhood is not ours, but it is something that was given by someone from outside of us. Therefore, if we find ourselves swinging too much to the ego side, all we have to do is say that our very individual being is a gift, and it isn't our doing at all. All we could do is be more or less receptive to that gift. The second is a very simple, practical thing, and you find it all over. You find it on bumper stickers. And that is, it comes from the Jesus people, the very Orthodox people. And we have no right to look down on them, even if we have this great cosmology and we know all of this and all of that, we have no right to look down on them. And in that way, they are really advanced beyond us, because they have you ever seen the bumper sticker? It goes, WWJD?
What would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do?
What would Jesus drive?
If we say, I don't like the idea of putting Jesus in there. I would make it WWCD. What would Christ do? And if you think every time you put yourself in the perspective of any other individual being, but especially if you put your viewpoint from the outlook of the cosmic selfhood of everyone, the selfness, you're learning to put the attention not in the emptiness of the vortex, you're putting it into the ocean. So time and again, like if you look at it from the other person's point of view. And the last is another kind of paradoxical, ironic way of looking at it. It puts together some of these ideas. The great modernist writer, who some consider one of the greatest writers of all time, but what I consider the most boring writer that I've ever read in my life, Gertrude Stein. She said, "I am because my cat loves me." And that was proof of identity. But that's proof of identity with the focus on self. You can't deny self, but if you reverse it and look at it from the other way around, it becomes a very positive thing. I am because you are love. I am because you are love. That puts it into Christ consciousness. And then no one has any existence unless someone is being loved. And the only valid existence that we have is really loving other people. And so therefore, in all of this, we can't invalidate anybody's experience, anybody's existence. It's you and I am because you're loved. And that's it.
And Richard talked about mathematics, the importance of mathematical ideas and proofs. Here is a proof that God exists. Euler was a mathematician when I read the 17th century statement that you talked about. And he went to a shaped garden. There was a man that was standing against God. The battle of Armageddon no God is being talked about. Euler was very blind in one eye. Euler. So he got up and he wrote this equation.
Thank you.
The other man had no idea what they were.
Oh, okay.
He was silent. He didn't understand what they were.
What is the equation?